This segment is titled really Digital Workforce Optimization. But you'll see here this segment title says the digital workplace. And the reason for that difference is digital workforce optimization looks at your entire workforce, how they operate, what infrastructure supports them, not just technology, but facility security, and how these groups and individuals within your workforce connect internally and externally. Digital workplace is really the technology foundation that supports your workforce. Next slide, please. So what is digital workplace? Digital workplace is really the tools you use to do three fundamental things: communicate, collaborate, and connect with other individuals in your organization and externally. And traditionally, email and phone were the primary methods of communication and collaboration. But over the last 20 to 10 to 5 years, newer and newer tools have emerged to help improve upon the traditional communication, collaboration, and connection tools. Tools like cloud services or soft phones that you can use to make phone calls directly from your computer. Or if you go even further, tools that help improve project management, tools that help improve product development cycles and how that translates. Better document management, so your employees, your workforce can actually see and find information much more quickly and efficiently. And then, of course, because of 2020, the big gorilla in the room, which is video conferencing. And here we have examples of Zoom, and of course, there's also Microsoft Teams and others as well. Next slide, please. So when we talk about digital workplace optimization, a fundamental component of your overall digital workforce operations, there are a lot of reasons that changes have been coming and why you need to rethink your strategy, even long before COVID-19 came into play in March of this year. Great example, new generations of people coming into the workforce have dramatically changed what tools you need to provide. No longer can companies have a policy to say when they're onboarding new people, here are the tools we use. Here's your email account, here's your phone, go get to work. Today, these individuals coming into the workforce, well, they've been using different communication and collaboration tools at a consumer level for much longer. So they're more comfortable with very different tools than traditional email and phone. And that means in order to make them effective, in order to attract them and keep them satisfied, companies now have to change their policies to accommodate those needs. Other unique things that have driven more innovation in the digital workplace space that a lot of people don't think about, different departments, different roles within your organization, they've come up with their own unique methods of collaboration and communication. Some of those, like Jira, where it focuses a lot on product development, software development, some of those features translate into other tools and translate really well for how an HR department would need to communicate, how a legal department would need to communicate. And so there have been a lot of innovations and a lot of products that have been emerging over the last 5 to 10 years. And being able to have a cohesive, seamless, well-integrated workplace optimization strategy is now more important than it ever was before. Next slide, please. Getting back to take another quick look at COVID and its impact, a lot of us have already seen and experienced since March the emergency lockdown, the work from home policies that governments have mandated, and it forced many companies to rethink how they do their technology. Now you have all of these telecommuters, you need to make sure their internet connections are up. They have all the tools that they need in order to be productive and effective in their roles. But now, as we move into 2021, there's going to be a new issue that emerges. You can't simply go from this COVID world and forced mandated work from home back to bringing everybody back to the office, because there are new concerns and anxieties in society today that didn't exist as much pre-COVID-19. That means ultimately you're going to have a hybrid strategy environment. You're going to have an environment that deals with telecommuters, that deals with people on site, but also within the same department, since you're going to have that variation, all of those tools need to work seamlessly together, department by department, and then, of course, outside of the organization as well. Next slide, please. So earlier I talked about the different drivers that are really driving the digital workplace and why you need to come up with a new strategy and optimization. So some of the things that I mentioned are the new generation of people coming into the workforce and the tools that they are comfortable using. But from a productivity and an effectiveness perspective, there's also a lot of real value there. If you do your digital workplace strategy well, then you will have much greater adoption by all of your departments from an individual level to a departmental level to an organizational level. There are real valuable returns on investment by investing carefully into the digital workplace. And finally, something that a lot of companies may not be talking about too much is technology service providers, technology consultants like PandoBlocks, like 3GC Group, traditionally are looked at as consultants, implementers, supporters, developers for IT technologies, information technologies like your network, your servers. But a lot of what we as organization, technology service providers can offer today extends beyond that, looking at physical facility security, looking at healthcare applications and smart applications to support your employees as they start coming back to the office. Next slide, please. This is a great perspective, and it shows a change that we're seeing in the market across a lot of mid-enterprises. Traditionally, as I said earlier, companies will look at individuals coming on and onboard them, providing them and mandating the tools that they use. It is a very business and structure perspective on how to create communication, collaboration, and connecting tools for employees. But that's rapidly changing today. And a lot of companies are starting now with a strategy that focuses on the individual first. So we start by looking at the individuals, what their roles are, what their needs are, and then we work our way out. How do we get them to connect, collaborate, and communicate effectively? We move out one layer and we start looking at the tools that are available that they are willing to use that will make them work much more efficiently. But then we have to add in another factor, right? That next layer out looks at governance, compliance, and risk, regulatory issues that make demands on how secure your digital workplace strategy is. And finally, if you do all of that well, that final outer layer means you're going to have real results. And these are the different types of results that you'll see. If your digital workplace optimization strategy is strong, you're going to have more revenue. You're going to be able to save money. You're going to have greater innovation. You'll be able to improve the employee experience. And that focus from the inside, from the individual on out, is a change that we're seeing in almost every industry among mid-enterprises today. Next slide, please. So how do you, when you put a digital workplace optimization strategy together, a lot of things are going to be new. And there is a certain amount of education involved in making the decisions, but there's also a certain amount of guesswork involved. And that means you really need to measure the success of your solutions and make modifications and adjustments over time. And there's a lot of ways to do measurements. A difference between a KPI and a measurement is you can measure anything, but a KPI measures against a threshold and a goal. And it shows you whether you're succeeding in your implementations or not. If you pay $500,000 for a new communication collaboration tool, you want to make sure that your users are using them. And so at the very base level of KPIs, you have fundamental technology KPIs. Is your equipment working? Is it up? Is it performing as well as it should? The next level, or at the very top, are the kinds of KPIs that CFOs have long been comfortable with. How is your bottom line? Are you generating the revenue? Is your overall sales improving? Do you have the profit that you need? And then, of course, in HR as well, you want to track employee satisfaction and productivity. But the two in the middle there, that second and third layer, that's really the type of KPIs that companies need to start looking at and focusing now more than ever if they want to have a successful digital workplace optimization. That first one, that number 2, is adoption KPIs. This is really measuring over time. So if you purchase Zoom and you implement it, you purchase Microsoft Teams, you want to check to make sure that employees are actually using the platform. Maybe it has an adverse effect on email. You implement Slack, a collaboration tool. Suddenly you notice that your email has dropped dramatically. Maybe whole departments can get rid of email. Maybe that means you can stop paying for as many licenses for email as you currently are. So looking at adoption KPIs, which is basically measuring over time, is really critical. And then, of course, there's insight APIs. These look at your departments and how they're performing versus their goals. These types of departmental KPIs can also impact the decisions you make on making adjustments and fine-tuning your digital optimization strategy. Next slide, please. So here we just have a couple of quick examples. Earlier I mentioned adoption KPIs. These look at, for example, Zoom calls or MS Teams calls or email usage. And they give you the kind of information that you really need to understand whether users are actually using the tools that you're providing. If they're not, you're either overpaying for something that nobody is using, or you need to adjust the strategy, perhaps add some training, add some user groups or communities to help foster usage or utilization of those tools. Next slide, please. And of course, as an overlay on top of all this, you've probably been hearing this undertone throughout all the slides that I've been talking about, where we're really looking at employee satisfaction. At the end of the day, because you want your employees to be using these tools, to be satisfied with these tools, and be effective in your organization with these tools to help your bottom line, what we're really talking about here is this underlying current of digital culture. And you're looking at how do you make sure your employees are doing the things that they're supposed to be doing without looking like Big Brother, and really focusing on looking like an organization that cares about their employees and their employees' ability to function within your organization. Digital culture today is a much more fundamental and formalized process within an overall implementation strategy. Next slide, please. So this is one example of aggregate data or big data. When you first start taking a look at all your legacy tools for collaboration and communication, maybe you've already implemented Slack, maybe you've already started using MS Teams. Well, most companies have already been using Zoom or MS Teams for at least 9 months now. But all of these tools you currently have in place, and then you look at new tools that you might want to implement to help your organization function better, there's lots of different kinds of guesswork that you're going to have to make. There's industry best practices, what a lot of other organizations are doing with their implementations. You can learn from some of those as case studies. Another piece of information that you can draw from is big data. Large organizations like Google and Facebook have already done a fair amount of research on, as a very generalized rule, what tools are people using and how do those demographics break out? That can also help guide you a little bit in your initial strategy. This is just one example of many. I like this slide a lot because it sort of shows how big data can break things down en masse to help guide you in your organization. In particular, I really like Outlook email. This shows that baby boomers and Generation Xers, we grew up, and I say we, I'm Gen X, I'm not baby boomer in case anybody's wondering. We grew up in a world with email as a forced technology on us, and of course, cell phone usage. So email is something we're very comfortable with. We use very, very easily and quickly, and we are familiar with all the ins and outs, the pros and cons of email. But you'll notice that younger generations, millennials, and even more dramatically with Generation Z, these demographics don't have a lot of experience with email. As they were growing up, they were using very different tools to communicate, connect, and collaborate with their peers, with their friends, academically and socially. And so as they enter the workforce, and if your organization has a very large community segment that is millennials and Generation Z, it can help guide the kind of digital optimization strategy you really want to move forward with, and what tools you want to implement and pay for to make sure that your organization is working effectively. Next slide, please. So all of this leads into a very iterative process. And of course, CQI models you have seen in a variety of different types of projects where you're constantly reevaluating and making adjustments. The same holds true for digital workplace. When you first decide to put a true digital workplace strategy in place, you're talking about a series of tools that need to work seamlessly together. They need to be integrated. And that means you're going to make some guesses initially when you do that implementation. But then comes the next part, which is the critical component. Once you implement that strategy, you then have to measure and track usage over time. Is adoption of those tools increasing? Are the number of minutes those tools being used increasing? Are departments being more productive? Is your sales organization closing more deals? Are they increasing their funnel? Are they able to get more first meetings? All of these types of measurements are impacted by your digital workplace optimization strategy. And that will then in turn guide you to fine tune your strategy. In some cases, you can get rid of licenses. You might save money. In some cases, you just need to make some configuration changes to your technology. In some cases, it has nothing to do with technology at all. And what you really need to do is some more training. So all of that guidance with the fine tuning strategy will then lead you to a new strategy. And that is that iterative process. Like the famous arrow that always goes half the distance to the target, you get closer and closer to, I guess what I'll term as that utopian digital workplace strategy. And the goal is to get as close as you can. The expectation should not be that you'll achieve that utopia on day one. Next slide. And this is just a final slide that I wanted to give as an example. Earlier, I mentioned that technology consultancies, technology implementers like 3GC, PandoBlocks, and many others, they are no longer providing just fundamental technology services, peripheral technology services, application support. Today, these technology companies like us are providing services and technologies directly related to the emergencies that we've had to deal with in 2020, like suddenly having to work from home, but also now providing services around how to bring employees back to the office safely so that employees feel safe, feel comfortable coming back to the office. And these technologies include things like temperature checks as you're going into the door that are automated, improved automatic door systems with touchless, contactless RFID, healthcare apps that give users information on any nearby outbreaks that may have occurred. You work in a big building or a campus, you find out that another department in your organization tested positive for COVID-19. Do you go home? Do you stay at the office? A lot of that depends on your proximity and your potential for interacting with that other department. And so tools today can help you make those decisions by giving you real-time information. And so there's a lot more that companies like us provide that aren't really traditionally looked at as technology service providers.